Welcome to the Lost Boys that Found Fathers podcast. I'm Gabe O'Sullivan, and joining me is my co-host and friend, Will Haycox. We are men who have suffered the loss of a child, and through this production we desire to offer encouragement, strength, and hope to our fellow brothers who have traveled the same journey. Welcome, Will.
Good morning, Gabe.
All right, so we are on episode 40. I know there's other episodes that are listed, and so it's 40-something.
I think it's 41.
Okay, yeah. So, Will, tell us where we're at and what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, appreciate it, Gabe. Like you said, this will be episode number 40. Like you said, we've got, I think, one extra episode in there was when we were on guests on the Let's Chat podcast, which is cool. You should go back and check that out. It's been a little while, so it's been up probably somewhere around the teens, mid-teens is where that would be in our podcast feed. But yeah, just been about a month or so since we recorded. That seems to be the frequency with which we can record. So I just want to run over what we talked about and how that'll lead into what we're going to talk about today. So the point we left off on was just kind of the responsibility of a husband to lead the household toward God. We talked about how you're called to be the spiritual head of the home. Your wife is called to submit to your leadership, and we went over Ephesians 5:22-24, which says exactly that. But it also talks about how this isn't licensed to rule your home with an iron fist, and that your wife is to submit to your authority as part of her relationship with the Lord, not that you are called to demand submission from her or to rule with an iron fist. And we talked about too, that your wife is called to submit to you, but you are called to love your wife and your family as Christ loves the church. So that between those two, the husband has the higher calling, and the husband is to sacrifice himself like Christ sacrificed himself for us. And so, we talked about how, the whole wives submit to your husband's thing is seen by some as like a proof text for patriarchy and Christianity, and how that's all women should be quiet in church and wear little bonnet hats like it's the 1800s and wear a big flowing dress and never wear pants and never speak up in front of other men or anything, and how that's not true, and that's not what this verse is getting at. The verse is saying there's roles for husbands and roles for wives, and the wife's role is to submit to her husband because God placed the husband in authority over her, but then God placed himself in authority over the husband. So what a biblical marriage relationship looks like is husband submits himself to the Lord and is able to lead well and lead in a loving way like Christ leads in a loving way, and then the wife submits to the husband's loving authority and guidance and sacrifice. And so it's not this relationship of husband gets whatever he wants at any time, and the wife just has to suck it up and deal with it. And the wife can be bitter because the husband's demanding things. That's not what we're promoting. That's not what the Bible promotes. So if you have any questions about that, or if that still rubs you the wrong way, we can go back over that in a future episode. But just wanted to remind everybody that this isn't what are those things, red pill or whatever. This isn't one of those like super masculine, like women all need to be quiet kind of podcasts. What we want is biblical truth and encouraging and God-honoring marriages. So that's kind of what we...
This is totally immature, but it makes me think of South Park, Kenny, talking about, you will submit to my authority.
Yeah, I thought about that too.
And you're like, but I'm not going to say it.
But I'm not going to say it, so Gabe's going to bring in South Park. Yeah. I talked about Breaking Bad, I think, at the beginning of the series, so that's about as far as I wanted to go with Walter White and all that fun stuff. So, we talked about that, and then we started getting into some practical advice for how to lead and love your family well. And just a couple of quick points. Talk about, the most important thing is to make time with God and time in His Word your first priority. The most important thing you can do for your family is to build up your relationship with the Lord, because, like I said, the calling of the husband is to submit to Christ's authority. And if you don't know your leader, you don't know the person you're supposed to follow and model, you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, and you don't have any guidance so that you can lead out of that wisdom and guidance that you are getting from the Lord. So just talked about that, and basically that exact point. If you try to love people from your own strength, whether it's your family, your friends, or whoever, eventually you'll fail, you'll lose patience, whatever it is, and how you can't provide water to your family if you're not being filled up, and your own well isn't being filled up by time with the Lord. So going forward now, that's all a recap. Sorry for the 4-minute recap, but that's what we got, just to make sure you know where we are. Going forward, after making time with the Lord and His Word, your first priority, your second priority should be family, and not just providing for your family, not just going to work. I've fallen into that trap. Like, my priority is my family, so therefore work has to actually be my second priority, because if I don't provide for my family, they're not going to have a roof. They're not going to have, whatever nice things. They're not going to be able to, they're going to have too much stress because they don't know where their next meal's coming from and that kind of thing. But I think that, not that that's a wrong thought, but I think it's easy to take that and run with it and get to the point where you do make work the main priority, and you just kind of ignore your family, and you get to that point where you feel like, I've worked all day long, whether it's 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, whatever, 14 hours, and you come home, take off your shoes, take a shower, whatever you do, and you're just like, well, I've done what I need to do today. I'm just going to sit around, whether I'm going to crack open a beer, whether I'm going to just sit there and watch TV, whether I'm going to go do yard work because something I want to do and it clears my mind. Like, those aren't necessarily bad things to get some rest, but I think it's easy to get to that point where you tell yourself, well, either my wife doesn't work or she works too, but whatever it is, I've worked hard all day. Now it's my chance to just sit around and do nothing, and I don't need to give more of myself tonight. I want to rest, and I've earned this. And I think, again, rest is a good thing. It's a gift from the Lord to rest and relax and recuperate. But we are called to sacrifice ourselves as Christ sacrificed for the church. And Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane didn't say, like, God, I've had a pretty good ministry here for 3 years, and I raised Lazarus, turned water into wine, I've cured the blind, I've cured the sick, I've preached a lot of good messages. I'm tired, I just want to sit here and I'll put off that cross thing, for a little while, and maybe I'll do that later. Maybe I don't want to do it at all. He said, if this cup can pass from me, let it pass from me, but not my will and your will be done. And so if we are called to love and to lead like Christ, I think it's acceptable of us to want rest, to want a chance to retreat from our family and those responsibilities for a time, and be prepared to come back and lead them well. But I don't think that then means that we can go in and say, I'm not doing anything. Wife, you take care of this. It's not my responsibility. So,
yeah, I think,
go ahead.
I just say your family needs you to take care of them and provide for them, because as a man of the house, that's what you need to do. But they also need your presence, and they need your nurturing, and they need your attention, because if you don't give them those things, then they're going to be resentful of the work that you're doing, and then that they're not going to appreciate that, and then you're going to be mad because they're not appreciating it. Like, you have to find that balance, And so I just practically, how do I deal with that? Like, I have my time. I think we talked about this earlier. I have my personal time early in the morning before I get on with my day. So when everybody else is still asleep, I'm up and doing that thing where I'm having that, time to myself. And then I use the drive home. I might take a drive. Sometimes it's an extra 3 to 5 minutes, but just so that way I've got an extra 3 to 5 minutes in the car that I'm listening to Tony Bennett, or whatever relaxing thing, or listening to nothing, because I've had people talking in my ear, all day at the office. And so you can utilize, you can figure out some other times. So that way when you get home and when your family's there, you can actually be there, present mentally and physically, because that's what they really want.
Yeah. You done?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't want to cut you off. So yeah, just exactly what you just said is where I was going. It's like when you come home, fight that temptation to just sit around and I've done my work, so I have the rest of the night off. That's something I struggle with too. But when you come home, like you said, your family wants to see you. They want to talk to you. They want to interact. They don't need a burned out dad who came home, and is fried and just wants to sit in front of the TV or do nothing. They do want to know about your day. They want you to ask about their day. They want you to, if there's an issue that, depending on how old your kids are, you'll deal with different issues, I guess. But if there's a behavior issue, if there's a relationship with your children and your wife, children and your other children, whatever it is, you need to be prepared. And we talked about this last time, by spending time in the Word, to take the discipline issues and the sin issues and the whatever relationship issues that are happening in your home, and to be able to meet those with the truth of the Lord, and not just come home. I'm sure both of us, I guess Gabe probably grew up in that era of like, you just wait till your father comes home, like
my mom would get after us too.
There's that, yeah. So mom was not
she wasn't a pushover.
She wasn't the pushover either, but yeah, it was like just this wait till your father gets home, kind of like dad might come home.
Double dose.
Yeah, and like he's gonna pull the belt out of the belt loops and get you. Like, I don't think my parents ever used the belt, but I definitely got my whippings. And so like, you aren't just there, and I don't think it's right for you to just come in and be that executioner, like the wife is the judge and the jury, and she just comes home and says he needs a whipping. And like, I don't think that's what you are. And I don't think, not that there aren't times when that may be necessary, but I think it's important that you can come in, you can talk to your wife, talk to your children about the day's issues, diagnose them in the light of what the Bible says, and what we talked about this biblical counseling conference that I've been to and your wife completed this spring, and getting to the root issue of something, and getting to the point of like, why did they feel they needed to yell at my wife about this? Why did they smack their brother or sister? Why did they just misbehave at school or something? And to get back to that pride issue, that selfishness, that whatever that is, and that greed, and teach them what the Bible says about it. So I think that's an important thing. Yeah,
I was going to say another in relation to just what we're talking about in this podcast in general is, if you're burying yourself in work and then coming home and bury yourself in pleasure, be that watching a ball game, drinking, yard work, whatever, not engaging with your wife and kids if you have other kids, why would you be doing that? Well, it's probably because you're trying to avoid the emotional pain or challenge that goes with engaging other people, right? So that's what we're trying to encourage guys to not do. Like, don't just avoid the feelings that you're having and try to push them down. Like, you gotta engage, and that'll make a difference positively in the long run.
And I think maintaining the relationship with your wife, and we're going to get more into that in just a second, but you are called to come home and to be a father. You're also called to come home and be a husband and a helper to your wife. If your wife stays home and does chores, or even if you both work, that doesn't mean like, I don't know what excuse you'd come up with, like, my job is manual, my wife's job isn't manual, so like I work harder, therefore when I get home I don't need to do anything and she has to do all the chores. Like, whatever excuse you can come up with, that's not right. And you should come home, you should help with chores, however you want to divide up chores. We're not going to sit here and say you have to wash dishes, your wife has to do laundry, or the opposite, whatever.
Work that out.
Yeah, you work that out, you find something that works for you, but don't just, again, whether your wife stays home, whether she works, whatever, whether you stay home or you work, however that works out in your family, you need to find some division of labor where you're not counting on your wife to raise the children and do all the housework, and your part in the relationship is, I work, therefore I provide for the family, and I don't have to do anything else. So that's what we're getting at there, is yes, it's good. It's God honoring that you are working hard every day, but that isn't where your responsibility as a husband and a father stops.
And guys, if there's any guys out there that's got a kid or multiple kids, if y'all ever had to stay at home all day with your kids and just have like a regular day, not like a day where you're like, hey, we're going to go to Chuck E. Cheese, and then we're going to go to the trampoline park, and then we're going to go to the park, and then we're going to go to Disney World, like where you're doing all these fun things where life is bliss.
Mm-hmm.
If you just have a regular day at home with your kids, or you had to help them with their homework, or whatever, at the end of that day, you didn't get nearly as much done around the house as you thought you was going to get done, and B, you are tired. And so think about your wife that's dealing with that every single day if she's staying at home, and then give her some grace if you get home and the dishes aren't pristinely put up in their place and there's laundry all over the place and there's toys on the floor, because man, she's been through it that day, and so her work has been extremely mentally and physically exhausting, and just like yours has been. And so that's why you're together as a team, you help each other out, not only in parenting but just in life. And again, have those discussions about about how you're going to help each other out, who's going to do what, so that way like Ryan and I, we just celebrated 21 years of marriage. And I remember when we first got married, got our first home, and we were talking about this, cleaning the house or whatever. And I was like, I do not like to dust. I was like, I will do every other house chore. I'll do inside, I'll do outside, but you have to dust because I just hate dusting. And that was, I don't know why, but I just didn't like dusting. I like the way it looks when it's dusted, but I don't like to be the one to do it for some reason, which is super weird, I know. But we had that discussion early on, and so now we know who dusts and who does the toilets. Me.
That's funny. Yeah, so what, like you said, whatever that is, or if you didn't know until now, whether if your wife is staying home with the kids, and I had to learn this because I guess I grew up, my mom stayed home with us, and I never thought it was easy for her to do it, but I just kind of was yeah, you're staying at home with the kids, there's some enjoyment in being home with your kids, therefore that's not quote unquote as hard as my dad, who went out of town from Mondays to Thursdays or whatever and worked all week. And the same thing for my wife, like you said, there's always that nagging temptation, I have to go to work, I have to spend time talking to this guy, and this contractor lied to me, and this one did something wrong, and I blew this, I didn't look at my plans, and so I blew where this pipe was supposed to be, and it was 2 feet in the wrong direction, and I looked bad, and we wasted time, and my boss yelled at me, whatever it is, So I come home and I'm my wife, it's well, my wife didn't do any of that today. She didn't get yelled at by this guy, or she didn't deal with this person who's lying to her, or who's disrespectful or something. So yeah, her day must have been easy. And like you say, maybe she did have an easy day. Maybe her day was 10 times harder than mine, maybe it was equally as hard, whatever. So yeah, I think that's a good.
And as Bonnie gets bigger,
yeah,
what is going to happen is your wife's going to come home, you're going to come home, your wife's going to be like, Bonnie yelled at me. Bonnie lied to me. Bonnie threw a toy at my face. I always think.
Yeah, that's true. So. Yeah, she's almost 18 months. Yes, she's already to that point where you tell her not to do something, and you can look in her eye, and she's like, "Do I want to do what they're telling me to do, or I want to do what I want to do?" So yeah, we're already seeing that.
Yeah.
So basically, all that to say, this whole point is that you are created as the head of the household if you're the husband, but that doesn't mean that you're this king who sits on his throne and tells all his servants what to do. That means you are to serve and to lead like Christ serves and leads, and that means that you take on the heavier burden so that your wife is able to spend time with you, your children, and most importantly, spend time with the Lord, and to maintain and build up those relationships. So, like you said, Gabe, if there's something you don't want to do, you don't want to dust, you don't want to vacuum, you don't want to do whatever, then you can split those things up, quote unquote, equally. Yeah. But what would be, if there's if there's a tie, I don't know the best way to describe this. If there's a tie in, I don't know why my brain's going to Supreme Court cases, because that's the weirdest, most random thing. But if there's a tie in the Supreme Court case, then the Chief Justice, or I want to say someone who's a better at whatever law history than me is going to get mad at me and send us a comment about this. But I wanted to say, like, no, that's in the Senate. If there's a tie in the Senate, the vice president can come in and have a vote. But all that to say, if there's a tie and, like, there's 20 chores to do, 10 and 10, and there's then, like, oh, there's this 21st chore, take it. Like, you're the husband. You're supposed to bear the heavier burden. So do more work than your wife so that she is able to be built up. If she has a little extra time, she can rest and relax because she's been doing whatever it is she's been doing all day, and she's worn out, and you are called to care for her by sacrificing yourself. So it's a high bar, but that's what Christ did for us, and that's what we're called to do, is to imitate Christ. So all of that is one thing. There's another part of this which we haven't really talked much about in this podcast, but I think it's important. Obviously, it's important. It's why you have kids. But God doesn't shy away, I guess, in our Southern culture. Like, sex is a taboo. Like, we can't talk about sex. We don't, whatever. It stays in the home. Let's not bring it up. Let's don't have sermons about sex and all this stuff. But the Bible is pretty bold and explicit. Sometimes, like, you ever go and read Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, God's not afraid to tell us about sex because he's the one that created it. He's the one that designed it. And, like, yeah, there's tons of ways nowadays where sex is perverted and it's, whatever, used in a way it wasn't intended for. But the original design for sex was for a husband and a wife who are married to each other to enjoy each other's bodies as an act of worship and appreciation for the Lord and what he's done, what he's given each one in the other. So, like, just going to that, like, God gave you and your wife to one another and wants you to delight in each other. And Proverbs 5:18-19 says, "Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth, a lovely deer, a graceful doe. Let her breasts fill you at all times with delight. Be intoxicated always in her love." And I think, if I remember correctly, I looked this up, but it's been a little while since I made these notes. That word, be intoxicated always in her love, is like be carried away. Like, it's almost like it's the same word we think of as intoxicated. Like, let your emotions, your, like, control over your body be taken away from you by how much you love her, by how much you delight in her body and the pleasure that you get when you spend time together sexually. And so I don't know if people think Christian marriage is like you have sex when you need a kid and that's it. Like, whatever, like, sex isn't about fun. Sex isn't about spending time together. It's just about, oh, well, we have 3 kids, so let's have sex one more time, so we'll have 4 kids. Like, hopefully, if you're an adult and you listen to podcasts, it doesn't work that way. But I think I just wanted to make a point here that sex is a gift, and God created it, and he wants you to enjoy it within your marriage, but you need to respect it and treat it properly. That, if you're just back to what we've been talking about the husband being the leader of the family and the wife submitting to the husband, I'm certainly not an authority on marriage relationships or an authority on sexual relationship between a husband and a wife. So I don't want to, like, go into specifics as to, like, exactly how does that relate to, like, the wife submitting to the husband in sex in marriage. But I think what we need to do above all is, like it said, like we just talked about, sacrifice ourselves and our wants and our desires for the good of our wife. So while sex is good, we need to enjoy it in our marriage relationship. It doesn't mean that we can, like, be demanding about, what we want or what we need or how frequently we have sex. It's not something that you necessarily should expect every day, because I'm a man and I work hard, and so I want this for my wife, and if she doesn't give it to me, then she's depriving me and she's cruel. And I think it's really easy to be on different pages with your wife. And like I say, what do you want in sex? how often do you want it, who's enjoying it, who's not, like, do you even care about her needs and her wants and her pleasure, or is it just about yours? So I think what I want to encourage guys for here is to take that time and have those conversations with your wife, like, especially when you're hurting and you're trying to heal from losing a child. Like, obviously there's that period after you and your wife have the baby that your wife's body isn't prepared and able to have sex, but you should, whenever that time of healing is over, maintain your physical relationship and come back together. And it's biblical that, your body is your wife's for her pleasure and her body is yours for your pleasure, and that, you two have become one flesh. And so, you're not your own, is what the Bible says. So I don't think it's right, and I don't think it's helpful and beneficial to separate yourselves from each other because you're tired, because you're grieving, because, whatever. Because I think it's true, and Gabe, you could probably speak to this in relationships you've had with hurting people over the years, that if you do allow whatever it is to come between you physically, that's like the highway to divorce. That if you're separated physically, you can come home, you can be good friends, you can talk about, whatever happened that day, you can be on the same page about, like, let's go to church, let's let all the kids do sports and, do this, we'll get our finances right. But if you're not having sex with each other and you're not maintaining that one part of human interaction that is specifically designed and reserved for a husband and a wife, it's really easy to let frustration, if you feel like you're not getting physical satisfaction as much as you should, there's like the chance for your eye to be caught by somebody else at work, at church, at anywhere, because you feel like, well, my wife's not fulfilling me, so I deserve it, therefore I'm going to go seek it out here. And she might think the same thing, my husband's not fulfilling me, so I deserve it, and I'm going to go this coworker here that's really nice to me. And so I think you're protecting your marriage by having those conversations with your wife about, like, what does she want? I know Hannah and I had to have that conversation because I was 24 years old and thought, like, we get married, we're going to have sex every day, 6 times a day. It's going to be great. We're going to go on our honeymoon and all we're going to do is have sex the whole time. And, like, if you didn't know this, men and women think differently about sex. Surprise, or, like, shocker. Yeah. But there is a way that a husband and a wife, whether they want sex at different times in different ways, whatever, can come together, talk about it, work through their disagreements or their just questions, and, like I said, have a God-honoring physical relationship that protects their marriage from the outside influences, protects their marriage from, whatever, thoughts of adultery, the separation that comes if you're not doing that. And, you build each other up by, from the husband's side or the wife's side. I know if you're not regularly intimate with each other, there's that temptation that creeps in that, like, I can't speak to a woman's thoughts, but I can just extrapolate from what my wife and I have talked about and how I feel. Like, if you and your wife aren't having sex, it would be really easy for you to start thinking, well, does my wife not think that I'm attractive? Like, does she not care? Does she not know that I want that? And the same thing, you're reaffirming to your wife that you love her, that you want to, like, physically hold her, that you find her attractive, and you're just, I'm saying the same thing over and over, but when you delight in that relationship with your wife, and you don't let, the busyness of life, you don't let taking care of your kids, you don't let these other things, you don't let work, you don't let whatever come between the two of you. You are doing what God designed your marriage to do, which is to fulfill the physical desires, the emotional, the spiritual desires that are right for your spouse to fulfill, and helping each other avoid sin, avoid temptation, and really appreciate all of the gifts that God gave.
Yeah, and I think there's this one verse that I don't know exactly where it's at or exactly what the verse says, but it says something to the effect of like husbands and wives, don't deprive yourselves of like this physical aspect of sex with one another, except for a time of prayer and fasting or something. So the Bible's even clear saying this is a vital part of your relationship. Is you got to get together and you got to be together, because if not, then it's a slippery slope. Guys or girls for finding somebody else that's going to fulfill those physical or emotionally intimate needs that we have, and we do not want that for ourselves or for our wives or for the people that are listening here. So like enjoy each other, and I would say in regards to this too, like take care of yourself. Like as a man, like take care of yourself, like make, to the best of your ability, keep yourself somewhat physically attractive. Like if she was attracted to you at one point, like let's make sure it stays that way the best of your ability. You're gonna age, your hair is gonna fall out, you're getting wrinkles. I'm saying this because this is me right now. Okay, so I do what I can do, right? I can't help it that, and my wife, bless her heart, I think she's an angel for staying with me as rough as I look, maybe compared to what I used to look like back in the day. But you still gotta take care of yourself, and if you take care of yourself, there's a good chance your wife's going to see that example and she's going to take care of herself too. So that way you do stay physically attracted to one another. But even if you don't, I mean, it's like you still don't have some right to be like, well, she's let herself go, I'm going to look at dirty stuff on my phone all day. Like there's no excuse for that. But yeah, take care of yourself. Work out together. Eat right together. Like those are things that you can do to help not only improve your sex drive, because the more you work out, the better your sex drive is going to be. Same thing for her. The better you eat, the better your sex drive is going to be. So help yourself out with that, and don't deprive your wife, but give her a little bit of grace. But have those conversations. I love everything that you said, Will. I think that's a great thing that you brought up here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, like I said, it's something that I wasn't like 100% comfortable with bringing up because I'm not an authority on it, and I don't want to say something wrong.
Well, you've been married. You've been married long enough to be an authority on this, and you've been through what you've been through, and so now, yes, you're an authority on it because you've got through it. Yeah,
and I think, I don't know, like you said there, even I guess I like what you started saying, like all of what you said, but what you started saying is where I was about to go. That yes, all this is true. I want to affirm, like it says here in Proverbs 18:19, like let your wife's breast fill you at all time with delight. That's pretty clear. Like God wants you to, like you said, be physically attracted to your wife. He wants you to have sex, to appreciate her body, and yes, get what you want in a sexual relationship, assuming it's not some thing that the Bible has said not to do, like a threesome, like adultery, some wrong thing that the Bible specifically says. Like, yes, sex is for a husband and a wife together exclusively within a marriage relationship, as long as it's not outside of that. Like, yeah, experiment, do whatever you think is fun and right and not sinful with each other. But I want to be careful to say, like, because like we said at the beginning, you are the spiritual authority over your wife, you need to be careful not to be demanding or resentful to your wife. And that's where I wanted to land on the sex issue. Like you said, that the Bible does say, like, don't deprive either, you don't deprive your wife of sex, and your wife shouldn't deprive you of sex, except for a time to separate for prayer and fasting and healing, essentially. And so, like I said, obviously, after your wife has a baby, if you know anything about where babies come from, you can't have sex for a period of time after that because it's just not physically doable. And if you are, like I said, if you come into marriage and you have this wrong perception as to what sex is supposed to be, what a wife's supposed to do for the husband, then you need to deal with that with the Lord. Have these conversations with your wife. And if you're, frankly, not to get too vulgar, but like you talked about, Gabe, this is there's a temptation that whether your wife looks different than she did when you married her, or whether you've just watched porn for so long in our generation, it's, I guess you didn't grow up like as young as I did having a phone and having the internet like super readily available.
Right.
But it's still like now, like you've got a phone sitting on the desk. I've got one over there charging. Like we could find porn in under 10 seconds. And it was not, I didn't grow up with a cell phone, but I grew up with like friends that had a computer in their bedroom. And so like you can still get it then, even maybe there was dial up or something. It took you 2 minutes, whatever, instead of 10 seconds. But like, what I'm getting at is a lot of guys, I think, 30 and younger, especially maybe even 40 and younger, probably have a tendency towards like watching so much porn that you think sex is supposed to be like it is in porn, that the man's in charge, the man's rough, the wife does 15 different sexual positions, you're doing this, you're doing that. And if you let your perspective on what your wife is supposed to be shaped by like this anorexic, drug addicted, possibly sex trafficked woman on a screen, then you are not only, this is a totally separate issue and wrong, like obviously we know this is a Christian podcast, so porn is wrong. It's outside of your sexual relationship with your wife. It's outside of your what you're allowed to do as a Christian without sinning, but you are then damaging your wife because you're expecting her to do these things that even this girl on the screen doesn't want to do. Like I say, you look at the statistics, she's probably on drugs, she's probably being forced to do this, she's probably, whatever, any number of horrible things are happening, and you're wanting your wife to match that when, one, your wife's a normal woman, so she probably weighs 10 to 50 pounds more than that girl. And I'm not saying your wife's fat, I'm saying your wife is normal and this girl's probably addicted to drugs and super anorexic or something. Your wife's not a porn star, so you can't expect her to do whatever it is they're doing there. So I'm just basically saying, be realistic and don't hurt your wife by demanding that she do these things that are unrealistic and wrong, frankly, if there's, weird, crazy things going on. And like I said, if you do come into marriage with that expectation, you're just heading for a disaster. So have that conversation with your wife. Have conversations with your pastor about like, hey, I grew up, like for me, I think I've been open about this in the past. I think the first time I saw porn, I was like 10 or 11. And so I've struggled with that for 20 years now, that there's always that like, this is what I thought sex was, because I watched it. I wasn't married till I was 24. So I've spent longer not married looking at porn than I have, became a Christian at 23 and got married at 24. So I had 12 years there of looking at porn thinking that was fine or right or good, even though I became a Christian and knew that wasn't something I was supposed to do. I still have all that brain warping by watching all this stuff, and so that is a burden that I carried into my marriage and placed some of that on my wife and those expectations. So if that's something that you are struggling with, whether you've even thought of that before and you're just now like, I wonder if I'd have these expectations of my wife because I've been doing this wrong thing I shouldn't be doing, like sit down with your pastor. Like I said, Gabe and I are experts on all this, but if you have questions, send them to us, and I can direct you to somebody, direct you to books, about why porn is wrong. We can talk about the Bible and what the Bible says about it and a marriage relationship and how to honor your wife and not just to use your wife for your gratification. So I think all those things are important. They're all hard topics. We could spend a whole podcast on it. We could get some expert in here. Ashton we had before could come in with his counseling experience and talk about the role of sex in marriage and how many different ways you can go wrong by using it wrongly or treating it wrongly. So I think that's something we'll maybe do in the future, but just wanted to take time to acknowledge that the goodness of sex and the blessing of sex, but also tell you to be careful. And again, to try to get back and land on this topic, what you talked about, Gabe, is like, not just maintaining the physical attractiveness, but also like building that emotional relationship with your wife, that when guys, for most part, and maybe not every guy's this way, but like we come home, we have a horrible day, everything's going wrong, we feel like a failure, our wife walks in with some, whatever, yoga pants or like the thing, so like your wife walks in with yoga pants and you're like, it's time, like whatever, you're ready to go. Your wife's not like that, like she needs you to come home and to love on her and appreciate her and to feel like you care, to feel like you want to hear about her day, that you want to build her up, you want to give her a back rub, you want to do the dishes. Like, just be aware that you can't just come home, flip a switch, and your wife can't just flip a switch and y'all have a great time in bed and then that's all she needs. Like, just, you gotta, don't demand too much, but build her up, I guess, and just make sure that both of you are appreciating it and enjoying your relationship with each other. So that's all we'll say. We'll close the book on Will and Gabe's sex advice column here, and we'll wrap up this episode with a couple more just practical tips, and then we'll let you go. So after we let's see, what was my last point? I got
just fulfilling your wife. I mean, fulfilling your relationship as a as a guy at home, doing your part, helping your wife, and then also fulfilling your relationship as a husband sexually, and then now, we're talking about how do we fulfill our role as being a good example. So kind of what are you talking about there? Yeah,
so being a good example, spending time with the Lord, serving your family, making sure that you honor your marriage bed and honor your wife there. And another thing, like you said, to be an example is to spend time doing ministry with your family. So like, it's an easy thing for us all to say at church on Sundays, let's give $5 extra dollars, in the offering plate today, and let's just tell our kids about how great that is. Like, yeah, you should be generous, but we're also called to obey Christ completely, which means not just giving money or whatever it is to just check that box and to tell your kids all the good things to do, but not ever show it to them. But this means like volunteering at the church, practicing witnessing, practicing generosity, and not just giving an extra $3, an extra $5 one time to a building fund, but like making that a part of your life, that if you need to set apart 2% of your income or 5% of your income or whatever it is, or like teach your kids to, at Christmas, we're going to buy some extra toys for kids that are in the foster home or whatever, in an orphanage or something, and we're going to give that to them. We're going to take part in Angel Tree or whatever it is, build a consistent practice around your family or with your family of serving together in whatever way you want to do that. And again, if you're to lead your household, you shouldn't leave this on your wife's plate to figure out. Definitely shouldn't leave this on your kids' plate to figure out, whether they're 2 and literally not capable, or if they're 12, they don't have that spiritual maturity to know how to serve someone and what servanthood looks like. So just don't let your life become so busy that you can't stop and love someone else and show your kids what it looks like to give of your time and your money and your resources in order to bless someone else. And the last point here is like bringing this home. So what does this all mean? This entire, I think this is the 5th part maybe of this little mini series. Yeah, so what does this whole thing mean in relation to the death of a child? And I think kind of where I landed with this, and Gabe, you can look back over our notes and kind of throw in your thoughts here as we wrap this up, since we're at like 45 minutes now, is that we can't make it through the death of a child without some scars, whether they're emotional scars, physical scars, spiritual scars, whatever. But the hope of Christ and the comfort that we get from him carries us through all this with joy. And just some quick recap points is that, in order to be good husbands and good fathers and help our wives and children handle the pain of losing their sibling or one of our children, we need to be God-honoring husbands and fathers. And that means that we are taking time to build and maintain a strong relationship with Christ. we're counseling our family in the truth of Christ. And, whatever that counseling is, discipline, that counseling is telling them Bible stories, that counseling is having family worship time, whatever that lands as in the moment. This also means, being a God-honoring husband and father is praying together with your family for the comfort and peace that God provides through your grief, whether that's just you and your wife, if you don't have any kids that are living, or you have young kids who don't understand, bring them in there and just let them listen and know that you are speaking to the Lord. And lastly, being a God-honoring husband and father means that you're taking the time to sit with your wife and to cry with her, to hold her, to be honest with her. And we've been over this before, but if your wife is just outwardly a complete wreck about losing your child, which is right, you can't just sit there like this stone-faced husband that's just like, I'm so sad, wife, that we lost our child and that you were sad. Hold her, cry with her, grieve with her. Even if you're not responding the exact same way, like, show her that you cared about your child. Show her that you're hurting too, and just pray with her in those moments when everything is just crumbling around you. Show her that you are hurting too, but that you can be a strength and a refuge for her because you have Christ as a refuge. And just let her know that she's not alone in this.
That's great, man. And again, this whole series was about loving your family well and leading them well. So make sure that you listen to all the parts of it, and hopefully it'll mean something to you, as I know it's meant a lot to me to be reminded of a lot of these things that we need to be doing. So we want to thank y'all for joining us today. Make sure you follow Lost Boys, the Found Fathers, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can also check out my books, Thy Will Be Done. That one is available on Amazon, paperback or electronic. And then my newest book, Every Little Thing, 6 Small Steps to Perfect Peace. You can find that on Amazon, Apple, or BarnesandNoble.com. Again, thank y'all for joining us today. Let's remember to not be lost, but be found in Him.